Okay, so it looks like no one's here yet. I'm going to go ahead and pull up. Yes, no one's in the participants box yet. And I pull up the chat too, and I will move those around so that they're not in the way. But I figure we might as well record while we can. We were having technical issues at the college at the Valdosta campus, which is where I work. So I had to come home, and it might be the only time actually that I record from my laptop, but it's just what I have to do because everything is down right now. All of the power is out for the entire building for several street lights. Actually, on the way home, I had to do the whole, stop and go thing. But I wanted to make sure whether you guys can come or not, I want to make sure and record all of this so that, and I'll go ahead and close the chat box until somebody else comes. But I want to make sure we always cover everything that needs to be covered. So what I will do, because no one's here, is I'll just kind of go through Oedipus the King and pick up on the big important things so that you know what you need to know for the test, but also skip the things that you don't necessarily need to know. Though I may ask you specifically about the staging or something like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that aspect of it. But for now, I mean, I guess what I want to make sure you do, and let's see. Yeah, we can go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and find another thing for this because what I want to do is I want you to see what they looked like so you know understand Greek theater a little bit because it helps to see how they're actually staged. Now, most of what they're showing here is actually a Roman theater. So let's go on an actual Greek theater though. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get in. You can see, yeah, there we go. Okay, so I'm making sure that it actually shows up. Yeah, it does. Okay. But the Greek theater was actually, and we're getting an advertisement. That's fantastic. The Greek theater was outside. This was, of course, long before we had any power, long before we had any, even beyond horse transportation. Horses and chariots and stuff like that. That's about all they had. But they did very early on have theater, and they had pretty strict rules about what theater could be and couldn't be. I know several of you mentioned the unities, or at least the unity of time, but the three unities matter. They have the unities of time, place, and action. And so essentially what they required is that the unity of time means that everything has to happen within 24 hours, but better yet, within the actual amount of time that the play runs. So there's no, 4 years later or, 6 weeks later. There's none of that stuff. And of course, plays and movies today totally break those rules. But for the Greeks, they wanted people focused. So it was a brief point in time when things would happen. That's the unity of time. And then the unity of place is essentially saying that everything has to happen in the same place. So this front of the building, you see this staging area where this person is sitting in the photo. Well, that area is the steps in front of Thebes, the palace at Thebes. And so that's just what it is. And they don't move to another site. There's not another scene where they're in the woods and another scene when it's something. No, it's always the same place. So you don't move. So, the whole Mission Impossible, where they move over to this city and then they're flying across to South America and then they're over in Europe and then nah. Can't do any of that. That would break the unity of place. The other thing is that it has the unity of action. So everything that's in the play is involved in the same overall plot. So it's not, how soaps, I mean, I haven't watched soaps, not since several of my older lady friends stopped watching them, but soaps tend to have lots of plots running all at the same time. And, for 10, one episode, will be broken up into pieces where they're all having different conversations about different plot lines. There's only one plot line in Greeks. It's just, that's all that's happening. And so from the beginning of the play to the end of the play, we're just following along with one particular arc, one theatrical, climactic drama. Okay. Now the Greeks tended to really like, um, they tended to really like tragedy, which is what this is. Probably because, I mean, if the Greeks had a motto, it was that life stinks and then you die. I mean, it's life is terrible. It's hard, and the gods don't love you. You know, the Greek gods. And I don't know, because nobody's in here. I don't know who, if you have any background in Greek mythology, but the Greek gods aren't loving and caring and kind, and they, oh, mankind is, you know, we're just do all we can to help them. No, they're selfish and mean and lustful. They rape mortal women and impregnate them with half, you know, demigod babies. They do bad things, and they don't care because they're going to live forever and they have lots of power. And the only time they run into problems is when they have differences with each other. But what happens when all these differences happen? Well, people get hurt, and it's always the people who get hurt. So life is hard to the Greek, and they don't think that the gods are on their side. But the Greeks also believe that so much of what happens in their lives can be essentially predicted. And so, and not because they can predict themselves, but because the gods know what fate there is. In fact, there were deities that were the fates. They were called the fates. And those fates actually decided when your string would begin. They actually were weaving a huge tapestry, and they would decide when your life begins, and put your little string of your life into the tapestry. Then they would weave it so it would kind of determine where your life goes, and then they would cut it. The third one would snip it, and that would determine when your life ends. And even the gods could not change fate. And so it was, I mean, you think about it being a fatalistic society. Well, it is. They believed fate was everything, and you really didn't have the free will to choose not to have your fate turn out the way it does, because it's just going to. That was pretty much the assumption. So now we get to Oedipus the king, and Oedipus the king is all about fate. Now, you've probably heard of the Oedipus complex, and I'll put that, well, I'm not, I mean, all it is Oedipus and then complex, but it's a psychiatric term or psychological term for what Freud essentially decided was this point in a child's life when a boy essentially decides he hates his dad and he wants to marry his mom. Now there are all kinds of kids when they were younger, they pick adults and they go, I'm going to marry you someday. You know, that's what Freud was really dealing with. But he said there was an inherent, like, tendency for children to assign themselves to the opposite gender, to the parent of the opposite gender, and want to replace their own parent of the same gender. That's what Freud said. Now I think Freud's mostly, you know, a little crazy, but what he was basing it on is this play, this myth in Greek mythology. And in fact, there's a corresponding one called the Electra complex. And that's based on another play, not by Sophocles, but actually by, who's it by? I have to think about it. But it is dealing with Electra, who is the daughter of Agamemnon, who's probably more famous in the Greek, in like the Trojan War than anything. But Clytemnestra, his wife, just hated him, and so she, when he came home from the war, she killed him. And then in revenge, essentially, Electra, their daughter, says, I can't let that go unpunished. And she sicks her brother Orestes and tells him he has to go kill Clytemnestra and her lover so that he can avenge Agamemnon's death. But it's, again, it's so she's hating her mother and loving her father. So it's the opposite gender thing still, but it's just for the girl. But the Oedipus complex is essentially this idea that, you know, boys want their moms, and, you know, in sometimes icky ways. That's again Freud. And then they don't want their dad. Well, it's based on the idea that here's this kid, Oedipus, and he kills his dad and then ends up marrying his mom and having babies. And that's just not only incestuous, but horrifying. And to him as well. He just didn't know what he was doing. But the reason he is all in this pickle it's a moment of dramatic irony. And this is probably, of all plays to ever exhibit, or any work to exhibit irony, this is one of the best, because Oedipus goes into it even before the play starts. As a young man, he went into it thinking, I'm going to change my fate. And because he tries to change his fate, he runs headlong into his fate in a way that he would not otherwise. So let's talk a little bit, before we talk about the play itself, know that anybody who was watching this, so the Greek audiences, everybody would know this plot. Well, they would know what had happened before the play starts. And in so many ways, the drama of this is not, oh, I've got somebody. Yay, Noelia. And if you want it pronounced differently, just let me know. And you can be muted or unmuted. It's totally up to you. I'm so glad you showed up. I'm just talking about kind of the background of Oedipus himself and what led up to this, and the fact that the Greeks would know the story. I mean, if anything, and you can, if you want to enter it should be a chat box that pops up. And if you at any time have questions, if you don't want to unmute yourself, you can always ask a question in the chat. Okay. So I don't know if you can hear me. I'm going to go ahead and ask you though, since we're live. And you can just say yes, or you can answer me yes, either way. But hopefully you can hear me. It says it's working and I'm not muted. So hopefully you can answer me. But in the meantime, while you're getting your bearings, so Oedipus was originally a baby, of course. Now, before he was even born, though, Laius and Jocasta, the two parents, the king and queen of Thebes, were told, mainly because he was a jerk, that because Laius had done some bad things, they were told that it was his fate, if he had children, he would bear a son, and that son would kill him and would marry Jocasta. So he would kill his own, essentially commit patricide or parricide, depending on the version you like, and then would marry Jocasta and have babies. And it's kind of horrible. And so they were horrified by it. So they just said, "Nah, we're not going to have kids." But of course, kids happen. And they didn't have birth control, and they didn't have, any of the other stuff that would prevent that kind of thing. So Jocasta gets pregnant. She has the baby, and they've already planned it all out. They actually have the baby. They take a pike and pierce his ankles, and then run a string through the ankles and tie it so that his ankles are bound together, which is horrifying. You think about a tiny little baby and what they're doing. And so then they take him and give him to a shepherd who's, a messenger, and he's supposed to take him out in the woods and abandon him. Noelia, can you hear me? You can just put it in the chat if you want. I've got the sound up, but I don't hear you answering.
Yes, I can. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Yay. Okay.
Yeah.
And you can feel free to answer anything you like, or you can write it in the chat. Okay, I'm going to go ahead.
Okay.
I'll shut the chat though. Well, I may just move it over so it's out of the way. Okay. So Oedipus the king, Oedipus was just tiny little baby, and what they assumed is, we've bound his feet together, we're having him abandoned out in the woods, some wolf's gonna come by and eat him, and that'll be the end of the kid. And then we haven't actually killed the child, not in real, we've skirted the letter of the law essentially, but that way we won't end up, Laius won't get killed, and I won't end up sleeping with my own son. So they think they have escaped fate by doing, honestly, a horrible thing. This is not good things, what good parents do to their children. This is bad stuff. But then they think, okay, now we'll live happily ever after. Well, when he's out in the woods, the messenger can't bear to leave the kid. He just can't do it. And that's a good thing. The messenger is a good person for doing this, but it also sets all of this other stuff in motion. So the messenger, rather than leaving him in the woods and dumping him, he gives him to a friend of his, a shepherd, out in who actually belongs to another kingdom. And that guy's like, oh, my two parents, Polybus and Merope. I'll just write those in. Polybus and Merope. Um, they don't have kids. And they really want a kid. So they'll adopt this kid and then they'll live happily ever after. Yay! Kill two birds with one stone. The messenger thinks, well, and that baby will never come back. So no one will ever know. And he decides to they do all that. So Oedipus is actually raised by Polybus and Merope. He's the king, the future king of Corinth. And so, he's living a pretty nice life. Only one problem, his parents, his adoptive parents, never told him he was adopted. A, they lied to him. And B, other people know this. And so he's literally somewhere, this is long before, of course, he even gets to Thebes. He's talking to somebody and they're rude and they say, you're not even your parents' kid. And he goes, what? And so he wants to know, why am I actually Polybus and Merope's child? So he goes to the oracle at Delphi. And the oracle tells him, well, he says, are Polybus and Merope my parents? That's what his question is. And instead of answering that yes or no, and no, of course, is the correct answer, they say the oracle says, you will kill your dad and you will marry your mom. And he's like, I'm not doing incest and I'm not going to kill my own dad because I love Polybus and I love Merope, but not in that way. Thank you. And so he, instead of going back to Corinth and going, Mom and Dad, this is what the oracle said, all he does is run away. So he goes to the oracle, and instead of going back to Corinth, he runs away from Corinth and he never wants to go back. And the reason he never wants to go back, of course, is because he wants to escape his fate, which he can't do because he's Greek, and Greeks know you can't escape fate. And to think you can is just pride. I mean, it's hubris is the word. We call that overweening pride, hubris. And it means that you actually think you're better than gods, because even gods cannot escape fate. But he thinks, as a young man, I'm just going to escape fate. Oh, yay, Ariel's here. Hey. Okay, so we got two of you. Can you hear me, Ariel? Hopefully Ariel can. Anyway, so he runs straight to Thebes. Well, he's actually at a crossroads. Yay, Ariel, and you even found the chat box. So he's at the crossroads on the way to Thebes from Corinth, well, actually from the Oracle at Delphi, and there's this guy, older man with a bunch of servants, and he's in a litter. It's like a little, almost like, it's a seat, and then that he sits in it, and then four servants have posts that they carry, and they carry him around so he doesn't have to do the walking. It's kind of silly, but it's what it is. So he's in this litter, and he wants Oedipus to move out of the way, and Oedipus is like, well, I'm here too, why do I have to move out of the way? And instead of having some sort of discussion or just moving, letting people pass, the Laius, this man in the litter, sticks his servants on Oedipus to kill him. And Oedipus beats them all off. One guy runs away and he goes to the king, and the king tries to kill him, and he kills Laius at the crossroads. So he's killed three people. One dude ran away, and then he killed the king. He doesn't know he's the king, doesn't know who he is, certainly has no idea he's his father. So he's just like, well, that was awful. What a mean man, road rage or whatever. And then he goes on to Thebes. Well, in Thebes, they actually have a pestilence happening right now, and there is a sphinx who really desperately wants to just destroy the whole place. But the sphinx has a riddle, and the riddle's kind of cute, but nobody can solve it. And so if they don't solve it, then they die. And so Oedipus says, well, let me solve it. I'm just a young whippersnapper and I don't have anything to lose because I can't go home. And so the essentially what the Sphinx does is the Sphinx asks him, what walks on four legs in the morning, two legs in the afternoon, and three legs at night? That's the riddle. And his answer, he answers it, is man, because man crawls on all fours when he's a baby. He walks on two legs through most of his life, and then he uses a cane when he's an old guy. And the Sphinx goes, "Oh my gosh, you got the riddle," and flies away, and he's gone. And everybody's so happy. The pestilence has ended. Everybody can go back to work and do normal things again. So much for COVID. And they're so elated that they want to do something for Oedipus because he saved Thebes. And so they said, well, we had a king, but he kind of disappeared and he's never come back. And would you be our king? And he goes, cool, yeah, sure. Because that, of course, then he can be king and he never has to go back to Corinth and accidentally kill his dad and marry his mom or something. He says, yeah, sure. And so they said, well, you're not married. And we've got this queen and she's a little older, but she's still pretty. Want to marry her? And he goes, sure, I'll marry her. And of course, it added to him being a viable king because he's married to the queen. So they get married, have 4 kids. And then this play starts. And so, what this play is, it's not that we're all of those things that happened over the years can't be shown in Greek theater because you have to put it in real time. It has we have the unity of time that says this action can only last at most a day, and better yet, only a few hours, because it has to run the same time as the play. And so we can't go back to when Oedipus was a kid and then look at Oedipus as a teenager when he goes and kills his dad and then marries his mom. None of that. We essentially what Oedipus has been doing, he thinks he just saved Thebes, then became king, and he's a great king and he's wonderful and he thinks a lot of himself. And so he's just in it to be a good king. And then we have another pestilence. Now, for the Greeks, anytime there was a pestilence, that means somebody had angered the gods or the fates or something. They'd done something wrong. And so Oedipus has already, before the play even starts, sent Creon, his brother in law, essentially Jocasta's brother, to go to the oracle to find out what in the world is going on. Okay, so this is very formal. This is not a realistic play. It never was. Greek theater was not realistic. In fact, the Greeks really tended not to, they didn't want violence. And so they would, even if there was a war, like they were doing something for battle, everything was off stage. And you'll notice this happens at the very end of the play too, but I'll go through it. But they were not prone to have lots of violent acts or blood everywhere or stuff like that. It was much more of a formalistic, almost poetic presentation of people. So they wore masks, and the masks would project their voices out more, but they didn't show any facial expression, and their voices, of course, they were just really projecting, so they were very loud and pompous like that. It's not the kind of realistic theater that we are used to today. Like movies tend to be extremely realistic today. That is not at all what Greek theater was like. So if we actually saw Greek theater, it would be weird, and we would go, this is not that much fun because we're so unused to the way that this is done. We probably like Roman theater more because they did real stuff. They had real people really die. Stuff like that, real fights, real lions, all that stuff. But the Greeks, no, we didn't do. They didn't do any of that. So with Oedipus, from the beginning of this play, he is essentially coming out, and it's very formal, lots of monologues like this, with long speeches, and he essentially is telling all of his people what's going on. So he comes out. All these people have come to the palace. That's where this is set, right on the steps in the front of the palace. And he comes out. He walks out and says, "Kids, my children, all my people." That's what essentially he's doing. He's their dad. I love you a lot. So what's wrong? Why sit ye here as suppliants in your hands, branches of olive filleted with wool? So why are you bringing me olive branches? Why are you burning incense? Why have you come here? And then he even says, I, Oedipus, your world-renowned king. Okay, just a bit of pride. He says, you've come hither to me, your world-renowned king. And so then he says, aged sires to whose venerable locks proclaim these spokesmen of this company. And that's the priest. He's with the whole chorus of people. Now, Greeks did this weird thing which we're not used to, where they'd have a whole group of people, and sometimes the group would like move from place to place but they all move together. They'd chant together, and a lot of what they say, the chorus would say in unison. And so, but there are very few characters, and yet this big group of people all spoke together, and they watched the action. So they were like our representatives. If we were watching the action, then they're us, as if we were on the stage watching the action. So all of their reactions, all of their opinions are to reflect us, just regular ordinary people, and how they would feel if they were in Thebes and there was a pestilence. Okay. So he goes, priest, tell me what's going on. That's really what he says. He says, explain your mood and purpose. In other words, why are you sad? And what is your purpose in coming here and talking to me? Are you worried about something bad that's going to happen? And he says, so tell me what you need so I can help you. Essentially, you're pleading with me for something. And the priest says, yes. He goes, okay, there's a problem. What's the problem? Why have they all come? Okay, when it says the house of Cadmus too, that's just people of Thebes. That's Cadmus is the long, 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 long ago father of that area. Okay, do you understand? Okay, so he goes, a blight is on our harvest. So in other words, the crops are dying. A blight is upon the grazing flocks and herds. So all the animals like sheep and goats and pigs and, cows, all dying. A blight on wives in travail. And that just means that there's women who are about to give birth are probably having stillbirths, and the baby, or they're having, um, essentially they're losing the pregnancy. So the babies are coming out dead, or they're not coming out at all. And then, with all armed with his blazing torch, the god of plague, which is actually Apollo, hath swooped upon our city, emptying the house of Cadmus. In other words, lots of people are dying. And the murky realm of Pluto, and that's actually Hades, that's the god of the underworld, is full fed with groans and tears. So tons of people have died, and they've all gone to Hades. Now, Hades wasn't a place where only bad people went. It's not like hell or heaven or something. It's everybody who dies goes there, whether you're good, bad, or ugly. It doesn't make any difference. For the Greeks, they didn't have this kind of heaven. They had the Elysian fields where nicer people went, sort of, but very few people really went there, and it wasn't really much different. It was still dark and all that because it's under the ground. So it was not a great place to be. No one wanted to die in Greece. That was not something they looked forward to. And so he says, look, but all these people are dying. That's why we're here. The flocks of animals are dying. The plants are dying. All our crops are dying. So we're all going to starve to death, essentially. And then we're all dying anyway of disease. So we need help. We don't think you're a god, but we think you're one of the best men, the first of men. And probably more than anything else, it's because he solved the riddle way back when, that, that made it so that he could save Thebes the first time. And so it even says, art thou not he who coming to town of so coming a long time ago to Thebes, freed us from the tax we paid to the fell songstress? That's the Sphinx. All of the Greeks at this time would go, oh yeah, he did. And so now they're like, you saved us once, so save us again. We need help. Okay. And Oedipus is like, don't worry, my poor children I know too well what goes on. So he asked, what are you guys here for? But he knows everybody's sick, and I know that. And I feel horrible that all of you are suffering. I suffer with every single one of you. I grieve at once, both for the general, in other words, all of you, and myself, and you personally. And I've cried about it. Many children many my children are the tears I've wept over this. So he really wants to help, and so he says, I care about this. I'm going to solve the problem. In fact, I've already sent Creon, my consort's brother, to inquire at the oracle at Delphi. That's what his Delphic shrine, how I might save the state by afterward. In other words, why are we having the pestilence? What's going on? And how do we fix it? And so as soon as he comes back, I'll tell you exactly what Apollo has said to do. And Apollo he's the god of the arts. He's the god of wisdom in some ways, though he's not that wise. But he's also the god of oracles, of seeing, of sight, or I guess ESP or something, And so he's all of the oracles are under his dominion. And so the priest is like, "Yay! In fact, Creon is already coming." Remember, this is the unity of time means it has to happen fast, and it's all it needs to be in real time. And Oedipus is like, "Yay! Hopefully, it's good news." Okay, so and here comes Creon. He says, "My royal cousin, what message have you brought from the god?" And he says, "Good news." Now, what's his news? What did Creon say would solve the problem? And either one of you can answer. You could type it into the chat if you want to, or you can just say it out loud. So what exactly is going to get rid of the diseases that are killing people? What has to happen? Or why are they happening in the first place? What bad thing happened that no one ever took care of? Do you know? Ariel or Noelia? Right, somebody killed Laius, King Laius, for 20 years ago, and nobody did anything about it. That person who killed him was never prosecuted, never found, never put in jail, never executed, never nothing. So if we want to end the pestilence, you can't allow somebody who's willing to kill a king to get away with it. Because regicide is like the baddest of all bads. You don't allow people to kill a king. Okay? So he says, find the killer of King Laius and either execute him, or at least exile him, kick him out of Thebes. Now, at this time, Greeks had lived in city states, so each one was very much independent, and you couldn't necessarily like go from one to the other without being really cautious, because a lot of times they were at war with each other. And so if you were kicked out of your own city state, the chances of you finding a happy home somewhere else were not really great. Okay. But that's what they have to do. They have to find the killer of Laius. And he says, he goes, we have to straightly extirpate a fell pollution. And we essentially, because we're harboring and allowing to live the killer of Laius, we deserve, that's why he's punishing us. And so we have to either banish the killer or shed blood for blood. And so who are we supposed to take care of? That's what Oedipus asks. And he says, before you did assume the helm of state, the sovereign of this land was Laius. And he goes, yes. And that's Creon telling him. And Oedipus is like, but I never saw the man. Of course, there's irony right there. Did he see the man? Yes. When did he see the man? And everybody knows this, except Oedipus. He saw him when he killed him. The day at the crossroads when he fought with Laius and he killed Laius and his servants. That's so he just didn't know it was Laius, but he absolutely saw him. And so Creon said, well, he fell, he was killed. And we need to find the person who did it, or the people. because they think it was multiple robbers who all set upon him and killed him and the servants. That's what the one surviving servant said. And so he says, we have to find those people who killed him and punish them. And he goes, well, where are they? How are we supposed to find them? That's what Oedipus says, because it's one of those cold case files, right? It's been 20 years. And he goes, if we look, Creon says, well, we'll find him. And he goes, well, that's just stupid. We should have found him a long time ago. But then Oedipus promises that. He said, Creon says, well, they said it was robbers, so a whole group of people, and, did it. And so, but we never found anybody. We never even found him. And so the murder we never knew exactly what happened. And he goes, how could you just not find the killer of the king? And Creon said, well, the Sphinx was kind of in our way, and we were more worried about that. Remember that Sphinx that Oedipus solved the riddle for and saved Thebes from. And so he says, okay, well, I saved you from that, but I will, he says, as is meet, I will lend my aid to avenge this wrong to Thebes and to the god, not for some far off kinsman, but for myself. Because if someone will kill a king, King Laius, someone will kill another king, and that's himself. Of course, he's saying, like he says, whoso slew that king might have a mind to strike me too. Now, of course, the irony is that he was the one who did the first one, and unless he commits suicide, he's not going to, that's not going to happen. He's not going to serve to kill himself. He's not going to kill himself the same way he would kill a guy that he doesn't know out on the crossroads. And so he's like, let's go take care of this stuff. We're going to figure out. He goes, success is sure. 'Tis ruin if we fail. Because of course, if they don't find the killer of Laius, then the pestilence will continue. Okay. And then here comes the chorus. Now, I can tell you right now, skip all the chorus stuff. When you're studying for this, for the test, it doesn't matter. They're just like, oh no, they're praying to the gods. They're saying, oh, will Oedipus find the right thing? Should we have hope for this? Can the gods help us? That kind of stuff. Like, now that we know, but we're still suffering and everybody's dying and blah blah blah. It's just kind of, it's one of those things where you kind of, that's where you got up and went and bought some peanuts and then came back, because it was not that. In fact, the people probably did. At least I think so. I wasn't there, but that's how I would see it. And then Oedipus comes back out and he goes, essentially, he's promising that he says it right here, very formally, this proclamation I address to all Thebans. If anyone knows the man by whom Laius, son of Labdacus, was slain, I summon him to tell me. If you have any clue who Laius's killer was, come to me now and tell me. And he says, if you don't come, let him reflect that if he doesn't come, the worst thing that could happen to him if he comes forward and it's himself, some guy says, I'm the one who did it. The worst thing that will happen to you in his banishment. I will not kill you. Okay. I will just exile you if you come forward and admit it. If you know somebody, though, who did it and you're a witness and you don't tell me, you're dead. And I'm going to track down the person and he's going to be dead. And essentially what he's saying, anybody, no matter who it is, that person's a goner. I'm going to catch them. And in fact, I tell all of my Theban people, all you people, don't you harbor him. Don't you lie for him. Don't you hide him. Don't protect him, because if you do, you're just as bad as he is. And if I catch you, you're going to be dead too. So it's an absolute, you need to find we need to find the murderer now, and he will be cursed. And so he lays a curse on the murderer and all partners in his guilt, that he may pine in utter wretchedness, which is, of course, since we know as Greek people that he's the killer. No, when you read it, okay, you can tell me, Ariel and Noelia, Did you know already what the ending was before you finished to the ending? You can just say no or yes. Okay, so you did not know. And I'm trying to show a little bit how it would be different for them, but of course we don't know. We know what Oedipus knows. And so if you bring kids to this play, of course back in the ancient Greeks, then they're going to not know, and you're going to be like, just wait, just wait. And so they get the shock of it at the end too. So this was a surprise, Ariel. Okay, good. But he says, he goes, I curse this murderer. I will find him. I will get him, and I will, and anybody who helps him, I will curse as well. And I will make sure he is done. And he goes, and now that I am Lord, I'm the king, successor to Laius's throne, his bed, his wife, and children. Although he says, I had children, he did not. Another irony, because he did have children. In fact, he had Oedipus, and Oedipus just doesn't know. Okay, so he's saying, though, I will find the murderer and I will take care of him and I will mete out justice and we will save everything. Okay, and the chorus, the main leader of the actual strophes and antistrophes, all the people, he says, I promise I didn't do it, and I don't know who did. So I slew him not myself, nor can I name the slayer. And maybe you think that Apollo giving us telling us that the murderer of Laius has to be caught and taken care of, you think he'd tell us who it was. And Oedipus is like, yeah, but we can't make the gods force the gods to tell us anything. And when do they ever tell us anything anyway? And you're like, yeah, that's true. And Oedipus says, well, I'm not sure what to do. And the chorus says, well, why don't you? And since the oracle didn't tell us, why don't we go and ask one of his seers? Because remember, Apollo was over all of the people with this kind of second sight. And the most famous seer was a blind seer named Tiresias. And so he says, why don't we go and ask Tiresias, and maybe he can tell us. And Oedipus says, that's so weird because I already sent Creon to go get him. So literally, Creon, as soon as he came and said, hey, we found out what the deal was, Oedipus walks off with Creon, and while the chorus is doing his thing, he sent Creon off to go get Tiresias, who lives in Thebes. And so he says, I've sent to fetch him, and I'm kind of surprised he's not here yet. Looks at his watch, And the chorus is like, that's really interesting. And the chorus says, well, I seem to remember that Laius was killed by travelers. And Oedipus is like, yeah, but nobody saw it. And so he says, okay, but here's Tiresias. So let's see what Tiresias said. And Oedipus goes up and he's like, okay, great Tiresias, starts buttering him up. You're so great. You're amazing. You can see everything. Please tell me. We got the answer from the oracle, and the messengers have probably told you we have to find the killer of Laius. We're the killers of Laius, the murderers of Laius, and slay them or expel them from the land. So, since you're a seer, could you just tell me what I need to know? And Tiresias immediately says, I wish I hadn't come. Oh no, crap. I know I have wisdom, but it's not going to do any good. I wish I hadn't come, else I were not here. And he goes, what's wrong with you? Why are you sad? Well, he's probably freaking out, actually. And he goes, can I just go home? And Oedipus says, no. Why wouldn't you tell us what you know? And he goes, you are asking the wrong questions, buddy, because you don't know why I wouldn't tell you, but I do. I know why. And if you knew, you wouldn't want me to tell you, which is, of course, very roundabout. But he says, I'm never going to reveal my miseries or thine. That's what Tiresias warns. In other words, this is going to be a misery to you, buddy, Mr. Oedipus. And he says, and Oedipus gets angry. Essentially, he calls him a traitor. And he says, why do you ask when you won't learn from what I tell you. And of course, that just makes Oedipus even angrier. Of course, now they're in public. Oedipus is asking this guy in public, "Hey, what's going on?" And Tiresias doesn't want to tell him. And honestly, Oedipus eventually has to threaten him. In fact, he says, "Oh, if you won't tell me, that means you're the murderer. Methinks thou art he who planned the crime and performed it too. So you're at least behind it, and that's why you won't tell." And Tiresias is like, "Really? Oh, you think I'm the one who murdered him? Ha ha ha! No, you're the one who murdered him." He says in the very next line, "Thou art the man, thou, the accursed polluter of this land." And Oedipus is just furious. Of course he's not the one. And Tiresias says, "I only told you that because you goaded me into it." And so they have this big old little tiff. And then Tiresias repeats, you are the murderer of the man whose murderer you pursuest. You killed the dude that you're the one who murdered the person that you're looking for the murderer of. That it's you. He says it pretty plainly. And Oedipus is all he does is feel like Tiresias is attacking him. Of course, Tiresias is actually telling him the truth. Okay. And then eventually he says, you're blind and you have no power over me or any man who sees the sun. So he picks at his blindness. And Tiresias says, "Dude, okay, so you may be blind. I may be blind, but you cannot see because you don't even realize what you've done." And so then, of course, Oedipus just goes off on him and loses his mind, calls him all sorts of stuff. "Oh, did Creon set you on this?" So he blames Creon. He thinks Creon is actually working with Tiresias to make Oedipus look bad, and maybe Creon can take his throne and stuff like that. And Tiresias says, "No, I don't serve Creon. I only serve the truth. Since thou hast not spared to twit me about my blindness, thou hast eyes, yet seest not in what misery thou art fallen, nor where thou dwellest, nor with whom." And that's really important. And even says, "Nor where thou dwellest, nor with whom for mate." In other words, you don't know who your own wife is. You don't know what you have done, and you don't realize who you have slept with. Of course, this is the whole, kill your father, marry your mother thing. And he goes, "Do you know your lineage? Do you know where you come from? Do you know who your parents are?" No, you don't. And that's why you've made this huge mistake. You're the one who's caused this pestilence. You've done all of this. It's not Creon. It's not me. It's you. And it will all come to naught. It's going to be a mess. A flood of ills will set thyself and children in one line. In other words, they're all you and your kids are all going to die because of what you have done. And Oedipus is just furious. And he says, "Why did you come and tell me this?" He goes, "Well, I wouldn't have come if you didn't tell me to come." Of course, that just makes him, it gets angrier and angrier and angrier and angrier. And so this back and forth, notice how there are only two speakers. It's where we get the word dialogue. Because pretty much that was, I guess, another little baby rule of Greek theater is that you only have two people on the stage for the most part at the same time. And so he tells him, he goes, "Okay, get out." Tiresias says, he goes, "You're looking for the killer of Laius. It's you. And you will see this and you will figure out," he even says, "You're going to end up making yourself blind." He talks about blindness. "And you will grope to a strange land. You will grope your way. And of the children," that's his kids, Oedipus's kids, "inmates of his home, he shall be proved the brother and the sire of her who bared him son and husband both." So in other words, he tells him plainly, you married your mom, and your kids are your brothers and sisters as well as your own kids. And it's really horrifying. To find this out. it's not good. And they leave. And then the chorus, of course, does all its stuff, and we're just going to skip this. But then we get to Creon, and he has found out through the grapevine that Oedipus is mad at him and thinks he's mad at Tiresias and thinks Creon set him on to say something. And he's like, really? Why? Why is he all angry? And Oedipus comes in raging. There you are. You just want to take my throne. You worked with Tiresias to make me look stupid, and now you just want to take, it's because you're just trying to take over. And Creon is like, why? He goes, I want the throne? No, I don't want the throne. He goes, this makes no sense. And he says, it's not logical. Okay. And so once he says, yes, I did call the priest and everything, but let me explain. Okay. Let me explain why. And this is the question. He goes, did you wed my sister? And he goes, yeah. And so my sister is your consort queen and she shares the throne. He goes, yeah. And he goes, plus with you twain, I share the triple rule. In other words, I get power too because I am her brother. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, okay, great. So I get all of these advantages. I get wealth. I get a nice place to stay. I get security. I get, to hang out with my sister. I get all this fun stuff without having to be king. And so he goes, why in the world would I want to be king when I already got the best part of both worlds? It would be sheer madness. And I am not mad. I have never had ambition to be king. And I don't want to be king. And he says, if you doubt me, okay, go on to Delphi and ask. Ask him if I plotted with the seer, Tiresias. Ask if what I brought you back from the oracle was not true. He goes, but why in the world? I would never do this. This is stupid. And Oedipus just doesn't believe him because he's angry. And he says, well, I'm just going to banish you. And he goes, oh, you're going to banish me for what? And he says, because even if you lie about it, you're still, and he goes on. But again, Oedipus is the whole point of what he's doing is he's pushing at things, but he doesn't know the truth. And so he's blind to what really happened. He's blind to his own culpability in this. And so he's blaming everybody. He blames Tiresias. He blames Creon. He'll blame Jocasta at one point, but he doesn't blame himself until the very end. And then he realizes what exactly has happened. And so he's been mad at all these different people, and it's not the problem. So does that all make sense so far? Okay, good. Okay, so then we get to Jocasta, and of course that's his mom and his wife. But she's like, why are you guys fighting? And in public too. Because remember, Creon's her brother. And then of course she has her husband. But he doesn't like, it's not like he's lording it over with her. She's really a good spouse. They've had a pretty happy marriage, actually. Probably happier than when she was married to Laius. Even though she eventually will find out she's married to her son, which is, gross. And that's probably the hardest part of this play is how horrifying the actions are of what happened a long time ago. But essentially, Oedipus tries to say Creon was trying to take the throne, and Jocasta's like, no, there's no way. I believe him. And so she calms him down. And then they go inside. Here comes the chorus again, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then the chorus tells him, don't be mad at Creon, because we don't think he did anything wrong. And don't banish him. And then they start, praying a little bit. And then so essentially Creon is like, look, it's your problem. This is not me. This is on you. And then Oedipus says, leave me in peace and get thee gone. And Creon says, I go by thee misjudged, but justified. In other words, all these other people believe me. That you don't, you're the only person who doesn't believe me. And so I'm leaving, but I'm misunderstood by you. And someday you will figure this out, that I didn't do anything to you at all. Now, we're not going to see Tiresias again, but he laid out exactly what it is Oedipus is going to discover. And it's all bad. And so then Jocasta comes in and she's like, so why were they fighting? And Oedipus is pretty mad about it, actually. And he says, okay, this is the problem. He thinks it's Creon. And she goes, well, what happened? And he says, well, Tiresias said that I am Laius's murderer. And she goes, he knows that, or did he find a report of this? And he goes, and Oedipus is like, oh, he won't commit himself. Instead, he sent Tiresias to say this. And she says, no, 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 wait, oracles, schmoracles. She doesn't believe in oracles because she says, and this is her whole reason, she said, when we were younger, when I was married to Laius, an oracle came to us and said that he was doomed to perish by the hand of his own son, a child that would be born of him and me. Now, Laius was murdered by highwaymen, not by a kid. And so that's not what happened. As for the child, and then she tells Oedipus what she and Laius did with the baby. As for the child, it was but 3 days old when Laius, its ankles pierced and pinned together, gave it to be cast away on a mountainside. And so he died. And so that essentially, we wanted to make sure that the child would never murder his father, Laius. But that's not what happened. He didn't get killed by his own son, and we prevented it. And Oedipus says, this is the first beginning that something's wrong. He says, what memories came o'er me, lady, as I heard you speak? And he said, I thought I heard you say that Laius was murdered at the meeting of three roads. And she goes, well, that's what the story I heard. He goes, where? And she goes, Focus. That's the name of the land where it was. And the spot is where the branch roads from Delphi, remember the oracle at Delphi, and Daulis meet. And then, of course, it's on the way to Thebes. Well, he came from Delphi. And he goes, and when did this happen? How long ago? And she goes, oh, just a little bit before you came to Thebes. And he goes, oh my God. And she goes, what is it, Oedipus? And he goes, don't ask me yet. Let me figure this out. Okay, so Laius, what did he look like? And he goes, oh, he was tall, and his hair had a little bit of silver in it, but looks a lot like you. And Oedipus, from that moment, thinks, oh no, what if I did? Because he knows he killed the dude. And when he thinks about it, the guy did kind of look like an older version of Oedipus. And he's like, oh no, did I actually lay a dread curse upon myself just now? And she goes, what is it? And he goes, I'm really worried that in the end, the seer will prove not blind. But I have another question. And Oedipus says, how many people were with the king? And she says, there were only five. One of them a herald, three other, and he was in a mule car, and then three other servants. And he says, oh my gosh. Who brought the story back? And she goes, the survivor, the only one who wasn't killed. So all other four guys, that included Laius, were dead. And he goes, is he around? Because if he was a servant of the palace, he can talk to him. And he goes, no. As soon as he returned and found you were king, he clasped my hand and asked me to send him off into the mountains, farthest from the sight of Thebes. And so I did. And Oedipus says, go fetch him. I need to talk to him. And she goes, but why? She goes, okay, I'll send for him, but why? And he goes, I don't want to tell you until I know for sure. And so every single step, so he talks to Jocasta, and the fact that she talks about her kids, talks about her little boy that they, of course, pin ankles together and tried to kill and stuff. And then talks about how they stopped fate. And yet, what was Laius's fate and her fate? That the boy would kill his father and marry his mother. And yet, that's exactly the fate he was given when he went to the oracle. And so then he says, of course, then he tells her, this is what happened when I was living back in Corinth. People said, you're not your son, your parent's son. And so he went to the oracle, and the oracle told him, I'm going to kill my mom and dad. Well, killed my dad and marry my mom. And so I ran away, and I never went back. And so now but it's like things are fitting too close together. And so he's really worried. Now we're going to have to stop because it's 6:30. Do you guys have any questions at this point? And I'll try to catch up. We'll probably be able to do Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching all in one session. And we may be able to talk a little bit longer tomorrow too. But do you guys have any questions at all? And okay, so let's go through, and what we'll start with is the next time he meets with someone. So try to look at where that is. Yeah, here's the messenger from Corinth. We'll start there. But it probably won't take us much time, and then we can start in Lao Tzu next time, because I did a lot of background on the Greeks. So if you guys, since some of you, both of you came a little later, if you want to just watch the beginning of the video, I talk a lot about Greek theater. So do you have any questions?
I do. Really on the essay,
Okay.
that's gonna be due this Thursday, correct?
No, it's not due this soon. Let's look. It's probably just a topic.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like, is an essay that has to be completed, or are we supposed to and do just a part one, which I'm a little confused because I have the stuff out. I'm just a little confused on what it's trying to say.
Okay, so let's go to this one. I can talk about it for a minute because it's okay if this goes a little longer, if this helps. Um, but let's just look at the actual.
Is the 29th. So it says submit research topic by February 29th.
Okay,
So
yeah,
that's
just the topic. So all you have to do is tell me what is it. Okay, so let's go to the essay assignment.
yeah.
I'll have to pull it up and share it. I've got all these different. I'm gonna shut this for a second. I'll go back. Okay, that's the wrong thing. Should be an essay. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing that, and then I'll share Microsoft Word. Yeah. Okay, so the research essay assignment, essentially what you're looking for is each era is going to add, you're going to do part one, part two, part three. And
Yeah.
you're just adding to it with another work each time. Okay.
Okay.
So the first thing is I would just pick, of the things that we read, pick which one you want to write about, and then choose something in it. And that's why with the theme, I mean, you'll at least have read parts of the Aeneid, because it's due next Sunday. But if you really like either the two works that we just read, the last two weeks,
Yeah.
if either one of them floats your boat, go ahead and stick with one of those. And you're just telling me kind of what is it, what element of it are you going to be examining? So like I talked a lot in this discussion today about fate.
Yeah.
And so if I decided, oh, I want to write about Oedipus the king, and I could write about fate. But I could also write about, marriage relationships. I could write about hubris or pride. I could write about death or murder or, crimes like that. And it doesn't have to just be the list that's there. It can be so many other things. I could look at, ignorance. What do we know versus what do we not know? I could look at irony and the use of it. There are so many different things that I could do.
Hmm.
But it could also be, anger and how quick we are to misjudge people. So anything that you find to be, or how we do things without knowing the harm that we
Hmm.
cause. I mean, so I just named like 7 or 8 different things you could do, just talking about one of the works. Okay, so
Yeah.
all your job to do for the actual topic is to tell me. You
Hmm.
can even just tell me, what work are you planning on looking at. Okay,
Hmm.
once you get to the stage where you know what the theme is that you're looking at, I'm
Hmm.
going to go ahead and I'll have you email me. Everybody will email me separately and tell me, what theme are you using? Death,
Hmm.
fame, luck, chance, change, hubris, whatever it is that's in here.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to give you a listing of a couple of works in each of the next 2 eras, the 2 other
Hmm.
units, and tell you these are ones that will fit into whatever you're focusing on. So you'll
Okay.
know which ones to focus on too, which ones to read more carefully to decide which one you're going to use for the paper 2. Because essentially what you're going to do, paper 2 will just be whatever book work you've chosen for this one and all its
Hmm.
discussion. And then you'll find another work in unit 2 that also comments on that theme.
Okay.
And all you're
That's
going to do
where.
is add
Hmm.
it to the pile. So you have
Yeah, yeah,
part
yeah.
one, and then you add part two and have a conclusion for both and an intro for both. And then part three will just be in unit 3, the first part, the second part, and the third part. But it's still the same
Okay, and
theme.
that basically creates the whole essay.
Right. So by the end, you
Hmm.
essentially have a comparative essay that compares 3 world literature um, sources and
Hmm.
looks at how they examine the same theme. And so you're kind of showing how that theme changes over time, maybe with a change in civilizations, or
Hmm.
how it's viewed differently just because these are different authors.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I got it. So that part one, I don't have to really send you an essay. It'll just be like
No, 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 no,
a
no.
paragraph
Just tell
kind of
me
thing.
what work you think you want to write about.
Okay.
And what's the other? I'm trying to think of which. I'm going back to content. Okay. So the ones we have to do are Oedipus the King, Tao Te Ching, and
Hmm.
the Aeneid. And
Hmm.
what's the last? I know there's a fourth work that we're doing.
From what I see, I don't think so,
Is
because
it
then we
just
have
3?
exam one due
Okay,
next week.
so it's just
Yeah.
those 3 then. So
Yeah.
all we have is the ones. So hopefully one of the 3 will float your boat, at least to the point where you can write about it.
Yeah.
But just go ahead
Okay.
and
Yeah, because I was finna, be rushing on this
no,
essay
no, no,
because it
no.
takes
Don't
me a
write an
little
essay.
bit.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
glad you
I
asked
just
that.
needed some clarification. I'm kind of glad, I got that
Yeah,
cleared
I'm
out.
glad you were here. So hopefully, and what
Yeah.
I'll do is I'll probably send out an email just to everybody tomorrow, just to tell them, okay, for the topic, this is all you need to have. And I
Hmm.
think looking, I got to look in let me look. Yeah, because I don't have. I just want it to be a short email, but literally it can be 2 sentences. It doesn't have.
Okay.
Yeah, not a paper. You're essentially telling me which work are you going to do and what theme do
Hmm.
you think you're going to look at.
Okay. And basically, what you have given that part one is for us to kind of, slowly get into writing our essay to
Right.
kind of. Okay.
Right.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, so all I'm going to be looking for is,
Hmm.
are you really looking at that theme and how, oh, good, Ariel, it's helping you too. Good. Are you looking at the theme in the thing? Like what I don't want is, don't summarize the plot, because that doesn't help.
Yeah.
Just show, where does the theme pop up. If I'm talking about ignorance,
Hmm.
or irony. And so I could say, where is it ironic? Where is statements ironic? I'm going to track down the killer and I'm going to make sure he's dead,
Hmm.
without understanding that it's him. Tiresias telling him, you won't believe me. And then he goads him into it. Then when Tiresias tells him, you're the killer and you married his wife, dude, and that's your own mom and you had kids, he doesn't believe him, so it just makes him angry. But it's all truth. So when is he like lying? When is he believing his own lies and that kind of thing? So you
Yeah.
tell me though. I want to see that it's really discussing the work. Show me the
Hmm.
work, use actual information,
Mhm.
ideally use as much of the text as you can. Show me the
Yeah.
quotes instead of just
Yeah.
overall sort of saying it. But the truth is I'm going to be easiest on the first part. I'm going to give you
Okay.
lots of feedback. And so
Mhm.
the second part, you can revise part one and then
Mhm.
add on part two, and you'll know better kind of what you were missing from the first time. And so I'll
Okay.
grade it a little bit more toughly. And then the one that's going to be graded the toughest is going to be the third one. But by then, it's really a revision of a revision.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully by then, I mean, usually the grades at the end are really good because you've gone through, unless you miss a paper, you've gone through the essay process 3 times and you know what you,
Mhm.
and you end up honestly with a really good researched paper that you could, I mean, it works as a piece of scholarly research. So you're really doing, that's what I'm trying to get you, is where you're really doing that level of stuff,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
with my help. So
Mhm.
any other questions, you two?
Mm, I think that'll be it. Yeah, I'm just gonna be working on that. Okay, I don't know if I say it, Tao Te Ching, that journal
Oh,
that's due
Tao
today.
Te Ching. It's
Tao Te
like
Ching, yeah.
the T is the D. A lot of
Yeah,
times they
that's what I
call it
was
the
wondering,
Tao,
'cause yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's how it's pronounced. I don't know why they put a T, but that's how it's
Yeah.
spelled mostly. But the Tao Te Ching, yeah, and it's more poetic, and it's like little snippets, so it's not like the play at all.
Yeah, that was definitely an easier read. Very understandable,
Yeah,
comprehensible.
and we'll mainly be looking at. I'm going to finish up Oedipus tomorrow, and then we'll look
Mhm.
at kind of some of the major precepts that they bring up. What is Taoism is essentially what the book is. It's telling you what is Taoist thinking or
Yeah.
Taoist philosophy. So it's kind of defining it for us, and hopefully it'll give us some good ideas too. So
So
there's no there's
are the live sessions an hour? 'Cause I
yes.
probably won't be able to make it to like 5. I think make it in here. 5,
Yeah, but if
10-ish.
you don't have to come to any, but I'm going to record them all.
Oh,
So
okay.
just make sure if you always come on Mondays, then you'll
Mhm.
still have a chance to ask me questions. And you can
Mhm.
also too, if you have a question that needs answering, you can always
Mhm.
email me a question and I'll answer it at any point, but I can also address it in the live chat and put it in the recording. They
Okay.
say
That sounds good.
several students have asked me this, here's the answer. So it's always,
Mhm.
just check out what you can always watch them later, whichever ones you can't get to. Okay.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you so much for coming, you two.
Mhm.
I'll see you next Monday, I hope.
Alrighty. See ya.
See ya. Bye.